Hey everyone, my name is Tristan and welcome to my small workshop in my basement. In my last video, I showed you how to build this Stormtrooper helmet out of EVA foam using pre-made templates. Today I'm going to show you how I painted it to make it look as close to a vacuum-formed Stormtrooper helmet as I could. If you're interested in building it, you can go check out my last video and maybe purchase the templates on my Etsy store. They're really cheap and the link is in the description below. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. Here's the helmet as we left it in the last video. As you can see, the seams are pretty clean, but there are some mistakes that will need filling later. Before filling or sanding anything, it's a good idea to use your heat gun to heat seal the helmet. This will ensure your first layer of sealer doesn't get absorbed by the foam. Now it's time for sanding. Use a low grit of sandpaper and start sanding your seams. We're doing this so that both sides of each seam are at the same height. The low grit sandpaper will leave an unwanted texture on your foam. To remove the texture, go over your seams with a higher grit sandpaper. Then go over the whole helmet quickly with your heat gun to remove the remaining texture. Now your seams should be flush and pretty smooth. It's time for filling. You can use any flexible filler. I like Quick Seal and Liquitex Light modeling paste. For my helmet, I'll use the second option. Of course, to smooth out your filler after applying it, you'll need water. I go over every single seam, trying not to use too much filler. The goal is to get everything smooth and level, not to get lumps all over your helmet. I let the filler dry for a couple of hours and then I add a second layer because flexible filler will always shrink about 10%. When my 2 layers of filler are completely dry, I use a medium and high grit sandpaper to remove the excess filler. Be careful when sanding flexible filler because if you go too hard, it might rip and you'll have to do it all over again. It's finally time for priming. You could use a rubber sealant like Plastidip, but it has a hard time filling small imperfections, so I prefer using Mod Podge. I apply it with a very fine brush to reduce brush strokes and I do 2 layers. When it's all dry, I use a medium grit sandpaper to remove the most obvious brush strokes because we want the surface of our helmet to be as smooth and textureless as possible. Because Mod Podge is basically PVA glue, it sands very well even though it's a bit flexible. You could apply your spray paint now, but I want to see all of the imperfections that are still on my helmet. For that, I'm using an automotive primer. What would be even better is to use a filler primer to remove some of the remaining imperfections. I slowly empty the entire can on my helmet. This is possible because primer dries super fast. When the primer is dry, I can sand down every remaining imperfection on the helmet. Once I'm done, I use my flexible filler to fill in the last dents and holes. I decided to only apply 1 layer this time around. Then I sand down my final layer of filler and we're ready to paint. I use the gloss white spray paint, but I would not recommend using this brand because it gave me a lot of trouble. What I think should work best is Krylon Fusion spray paint. I use the entire can in 5 or 6 thin layers to get a smooth, glossy finish. This is how the helmet looks, all white. Now I'll use black acrylic paint to make the brow, the side and middle vents, and the spacing between the teeth black. When that's done, I mix black and white paint to make the teeth, the buttons on the ears, and every inset gray. And finally, I use silver paint to make the inside of the side vents silver. I applied 2 or 3 coats of every color. It's time to make the stripes on the side of the helmet, and for that I use blue electrical tape. I cut the tape into small rectangles and carefully apply them to the helmet. It helps to hold the piece with your X-Acto knife while you position it, then just press it down with your finger. Let's make the lenses. I used a thick piece of plexiglass because it's all I had on hand. I put a piece of paper inside the helmet to trace the shape of the eye hole on it. Then I add about a 1/4 inch of space all around the template and I cut it out. After that, I trace it down twice on my plexiglass. Now it's time to cut them out. I use my Dremel with a cutting bit. I first cut around my pieces to have less material to deal with. Next, I carefully follow the line I traced. When the cut is done, I remove the flashing and sand down the sides. I then remove the protective film and I use my heat gun to heat up the pieces so they become soft and malleable. Next, I curve them over a round object so they fit better inside the helmet. Now it's time to tint those lenses. I use window tint which I apply dry. It's really hard to do and it took me a couple of tries, but it was worth it. I had to apply 2 layers to get the desired effect. We're nearly done. I use hot glue to fix my lenses in place in my helmet. I just love the reflection you get from using window tint. The last step is to hot glue some padding in the helmet to make it fit properly. And now you have your own completed foam Stormtrooper helmet. So this is the final result, and to be honest, it's one of my favorite helmets I ever built. If you want to make the Shadow Trooper version instead, just follow the same steps but with mostly black and a bit of silver. I really love those 2 helmets and I'm so happy to have them in my collection. As I said at the beginning of the video, you can get the templates to make this helmet on my Etsy store for pretty cheap. I'm also now selling finished helmets, which you can see on screen right now. If you like what I do and you want to support me, buying a helmet is the best way to do that. Plus, you get an awesome helmet for a pretty good price. So, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more cool stuff like this. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.